My dear friends, welcome to World Cargo Summit 2021. My company has organized air cargo events since 1999 and have mainly focused on regional conferences in Northern Europe, CIS, Middle East, Asia and Africa. In these crazy, disruptive times, I felt that instead of turning these incumbent ones into virtual events, I saw the opportunity to combine all contacts I have in various regions into a new worldwide happening designed entirely for the new web-based reality. When I started planning this event in August something, my aim was to get 60 speakers. I failed. We only have 53, but I hope it should be okay for you anyhow. And I was maybe hoping for something like 200, 300 participants. But again, I was wrong. Guess what? This morning we reached more than 900 participants. And until the fat lady sings, end of day tomorrow, we might reach over 1,000 people joining us. I'm amazed, and I'm certainly thankful for the strong support I have received from all of you. From speakers, we have been able to line up so many key air cargo managers. My aim to create a truly global event worked out. We have people now from 85 different countries joining us today and tomorrow from all continents. We have cargo managers among us from Comoros, Burkina Faso, Congo, Peru, Trinidad, Myanmar, and many other wonderful places. I hope that you will have some fun during these 2 days when meeting the global cargo community. I could never believe that my biggest event so far would take place in these difficult times. Thank you, my friends. Since COVID-19 is accelerating dispersion across many economic sectors and regions, it is important that we face current and future challenges together and try to find sustainable solutions on industry issues jointly and for the benefit of all nations. Air cargo has a vital role to play when it comes to facilitating trade, keeping trade lanes open, and above all, get the vaccine out to all parts of the world so our economies can rebound again. Our conference theme is transforming global air logistics beyond the crisis. I can honestly say that when planning this event last year, I maybe thought that by now things should have improved more and economic activity, including travel, should get back to normal, at least a bit. As you all know, we again see many dark clouds, again facing the travel, hospitality and airline industries. New strict lockdowns are in force in many countries. KLM had to cease all long-haul flights a few days ago, and the current situation is grim for many airports and airlines. It will take time until our industry will rebound, but be sure it will. At least the world has come to understand the highly crucial role of freighter operations. Cargo moving in full freighters or cargo-only passenger flights have been essential in order to keep medical equipment and general cargo moving. To summarize, air cargo is more important for airlines and airports than ever. Still, we have to realize that the current turmoil will lead to a structurally very different industry. We are not talking about incremental adjustment. It will be a fundamental change. I'm glad that we have so many great industry leaders among us here at World Cargo Summit who can assess their ideas on future avenues for global air cargo. It is great for all of us to be able soon to meet Peter Gerber, the chairman of the executive board and CEO of Lufthansa Cargo, and listen to his thoughts on the conference theme and all other interesting presentations that will follow. One of our most important panels will be the big challenge delivering vaccines to all corners of the world tomorrow morning, European time, hosted by Pharma Aero, with 12 great speakers, including 3 vaccine manufacturers, not to be missed. They will look deep into what lessons we can learn from the ongoing vaccine delivery challenges so far. If you're not able to listen live, note that all sessions will be available for on-demand viewing afterwards. It is important with good speakers in conferences, of course. However, I'm especially happy that for the very first time, we can offer you a great networking system so you can invest your time into the most important thing with attending conferences. I mean, meeting old contacts and above all, finding new business contacts. Check out how you can book one-by-one meetings if you have not done it already. Unfortunately, we don't have any hotel bars here, but make sure that you explore these cool virtual networking setup. We had not been able to meet today without the generous support from all our sponsors. My most sincere thanks go to my platinum sponsor, Etihad Cargo. Thank you very much.
We've developed dedicated air cargo and freight services you can trust, letting you ship to and from almost anywhere in the world. Our specialist teams work with you and find flexible and reliable cargo solutions that really work for you and your business. We're proud to be your air cargo partner of choice. Awarded IATA's CIV certification in pharmaceutical logistics, our Pharma Life service lets you ship pharmaceuticals safely and reliably in the quickest time possible. And we're proud members of the HOPE Consortium, helping to facilitate distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine worldwide. Our Fresh Forward service makes moving fresh and perishable items simple. And we're IATA CIV Fresh certified. Sky Stables will guarantee a comfortable journey for your horse and peace of mind for you. From family pets to global conservation projects, our live animal service is the safest and fastest way to transport animals. Fly Culture is a reliable way to ship your valuable items across the globe safely, securely and discreetly. Fly Valet makes it quick and easy to transport high-value vehicles across the globe. Safeguard is our dedicated service for transporting valuable cargo and guarantees that most precious items are shipped with the highest degree of care and security. Our email and e-commerce services are the most reliable way to send letters and packages internationally, whatever the size of your business. Our on-demand charter services are simple, flexible and fully customisable. Whatever you need to ship, whatever you need to send, we're here to help you. Speak to our cargo experts today.
Yeah. And thanks to our gold sponsors, Volga Dnieper Group, Liège Airport, Brussels Airport, Astral Aviation, and Örebro Airport. Thank you. Furthermore, Air Cargo Media has supported World Cargo Summit. I acknowledge the kind generosity of Air Cargo News, Air Cargo Week, Air Cargo Update, Airline Cargo Management, Air Logistics International, Air Cargo Latin America, Air Cargo ICE, CAS, Asia Cargo News, and Cargo Trends. Finally, a few words on how to forward your questions to our speakers. Do not miss the opportunity to join the QA part of the sessions using the chat function. That's the way you can use in order to put forward comments and questions to our speakers. Without further ado, it is time to kick off our conference. Let's go first to beautiful Luxembourg, where we find Frédéric Chapelle, partner at PwC, who will moderate the first opening session, The Road to Recovery. We are a little bit early, but I hear that they are ready. So, calling you, Frédéric, are you ready?
Yes. Hello, Lars.
Thank
Gunnar.
you.
How are you today?
Great.
So, Luxembourg is fine. Weather is still fine. It's quite exceptional for this season. So I'm really delighted today to welcome you. And you can see in background our office in Luxembourg for this, for my side, my first video stage. So today I'm really happy to welcome our dear panelists to talk about the road to recovery. And for sure, for all the people listening to us, don't hesitate to pose your question in the chat to be as interactive as possible when the guests will have finished their speech. So today, the road recovery, we will touch many topics for sure. What cargo industry will emerge beyond today's, and when we face this quite, I would say, unusual time. What will be the outlook for 2021, restoring the network, and for sure maybe a bigger and longer term pictures about environment and sustainability, where we know it's a big challenge for this industry. So I'm really delighted today to have three highly valuable guests. So for sure, one of the industry leader today is joining us is Peter Gerber. Peter Gerber, who started his career in Lufthansa and still at Lufthansa Group. He had many senior positions, and he was appointed in 2014 chairman and CEO of Lufthansa Cargo. And I know that soon he will be appointed for the group to other, I would say, very top responsibilities in Belgium. So I'm really pleased that he is joining us today. With Peter, we will have Martin Drew. Martin Drew is Sales and Cargo Senior Vice President at Etihad. He has an outstanding career at Etihad that he started in 2005. So also somebody with a long history, a journey in this air cargo industry. And our third guest is Steven Polmans. Steven Polmans was recently appointed as Chief Customer Officer at Nalian, but is today speaking on behalf of TIACA, where he is the chairman since a couple of years. As a quick introduction for sure. Cargo business is, I would say, has been less impacted in 2020 than passenger business. That's quite obvious by the pandemic. We only saw quite a short dip in the spring 2020, but soon we will see progressively, I think in 21, a recovery of the belly capacities. But we still don't know totally clear who would like the recovery. It will be fast, slow. So this is a lot of still uncertainty that we will have to deal. And our guests today will give their views on this 2021 outlook, and also probably where they expect a stronger recovery 2022, or maybe for some, we know that it's around 2025, according some, I would say, statistics. And we need also to take into consideration in this recovery, I would say, the march towards sustainability, sustainable world. And we know that air transport as a whole represents, roughly speaking, 2% of the global carbon emission. The industry is committed to achieving carbon neutral growth by the 2020s and reducing by 50% the net emission by 2050. And I know that all the speakers today and their companies, they are really involved to this contribution. But I would say, despite the turbulent economic times in the pandemic, how our companies and our industry will be able to support a kind of greener air cargo and industry when we will face all these challenges. And I hope that our guests will give us some touch points and hints about these topics. And now I will let the floor to Mr. Peter Gerber, CEO and Chairman of Lufthansa Cargo. Please, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frederick. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very special pleasure for me to speak to you here today, and I thank the organizers of the World Cargo Summit very much for this opportunity. The coronavirus has pretty much turned the world upside down over the past year. But despite all changes and challenges, one thing has clearly proven true. Air cargo is a people's business. And that's why it's my pleasure that we are coming together, at least digitally, in this particular situation. Air cargo is almost traditionally an extremely volatile business. But what we have experienced in the last 12 months is truly historic. And so is what our industry has achieved during the last 12 months. At Lufthansa Cargo, we are proud of the fact that we have managed to maintain our global freighter network at all times, despite a multitude of ever-changing regulations as reactions to the pandemic. Even in the most difficult and uncertain days, we have found workarounds to continue flying to China, for example. Later, we coined the term freighter at Lufthansa and contributed to the worldwide supply. First, of personal protective equipment, like protective masks, and later, of course, of test kits and vaccines. After all, it has perhaps never been as clear to the world as it is today what an important contribution air cargo makes every day to the world. The efforts to achieve this have been enormous. In recent years, the air cargo market has sometimes been characterized by overcapacities, but suddenly almost all bellies were grounded. And yet, with a great deal of heart and soul, with a great team, we managed to compensate for a large part of the shortfalls. Even more, we prepared intensively to bring large quantities of sensitive vaccines into the world quickly and reliably. We are thus making an important contribution to overcoming the global pandemic. But there still is the question, what happens next? When will passenger business start up again? How will it develop in the future? And what does this mean for air cargo? When I'm asked for the bigger picture, I'm convinced that the aviation industry as a whole must focus on sustainable and qualitative growth. However, this is not an answer to the pandemic, but it is the undeniable part of our corporate responsibility, and we owe it to future generations. The most obvious part of this are, of course, our CO2 emissions. I know some industry representatives like to appease on this issue, pointing out that aviation accounts for less than 3% of the emissions. Anyhow, this is not the point. It's all about us as an industry doing our utmost and making our contribution to the world. And that is why I am very proud that we at Lufthansa Cargo recently have aligned our long-standing corporate responsibility with Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We will complete our fleet modernization to exclusively highly efficient twin-jet aircraft this year. We, as Lufthansa Cargo, together with our customer DB Schenker, have already carried out the world's first climate-neutral freighter flight last year, despite all the turbulences we experienced. And we are doing our utmost to add many, many more. And I firmly believe that we as an industry can achieve even more together. For example, the Lufthansa Group, together with the Abu Dhabi Department of Energy, Siemens Energy Global, Mazda and Marubeni Corporation, Khalifa University, and Etihad Airways, and I believe this esteemed colleague Martin Drew will be able to confirm this, is actively involved in a pioneering project to generate green hydrogen. This is a key component in the production of so-called power-to-liquid kerosene and is therefore essential and paramount for the energy transition in aviation. And I believe we have to achieve this as far as possible on our own initiative, since it is the responsibility of our industry. To round off the bigger picture, I am also convinced the pandemic was and is a strong catalyst for digitization. That's why I'm very pleased that we as Lufthansa Cargo have already made considerable progress in recent years in terms of digital services for our customers. And it is and remains right to continue on this path with a lot of drive. In times of extensive cross-border e-commerce and global retailers with their own aircraft fleets, it is simply not conceivable that some data errors only become apparent on a paper manifest during a physical check and then lead to an offload. We will only be able to further accelerate air freight with further and, if possible, complete digitization along all our processes. Improving the air cargo industry first and foremost means improving ground processes with digital solutions, but also in customizing and modernizing the facilities accordingly. Back to the big picture. Digitization has revolutionized the flow of information. Just look at the media landscape, for example. Digitization has revolutionized financial flows. Just think of online banking, completely new payment providers, of cryptocurrencies. We should not believe that digitization will leave everything as it is when it comes to the flow of goods. Even if the way of 3D printing for the ability of beaming may still seem long, real disruptions are coming more collaterally. Therefore, I can only advise to observe all, even early, developments very critically and take them seriously. And also, of course, look at the opportunities. The growing globalization and the smaller getting world are opportunities for air cargo. From visions back to the tangible. The global spread of home office and digital summits like today will leave their mark on passenger traffic. At the same time, however, we all sense that digital cannot replace direct human contact. And if I may have my way, it shouldn't either. I look forward to the next opportunity when we can meet again in person, shake hands, and perhaps pat ourselves on the back for having made our industry a little faster for our customers and way more sustainable for future generations. And of course, even have some drinks, enjoy some drinks at the hotel bars. Thank you very much for listening, and I look very much forward to further exchanging with you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. I think now we can move to Martin. Martin in Abu Dhabi.
Great, thanks, Frederick. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Let me first of all just take this opportunity just to thank Lars for allowing us to open with our video, and then also allowing me now just to provide a quick update on Etihad, and just rest assured it's a limited number of slides. This is not going to be death by PowerPoint. So just wanted to provide a sort of an overview on where we've been and where we're at now, and how we see things going forwards. So I took over responsibility for Etihad Cargo in November. I also have responsibility for passenger sales. And my goodness, you couldn't have two more contrasting businesses at the moment. Pre-COVID, we carried about 70% of our cargo was carried in the belly and 30% in the freighter. So of course, as a combination carrier, there's a direct correlation between the two. And ultimately, a return of passenger demand is key to our financial sustainability. So therefore, we are heavily focused on rebuilding passenger confidence while continuing to, of course, navigate our way through the impact of COVID, with second waves, with new variants, with countries that are continuing to enforce differing and more stringent restrictions. And this is, of course, this is going to continue for the foreseeable future, even with the rollout of the vaccine now underway. And what you see here is our latest marketing campaign that's re-emphasizing the lengths that we're going to ensure the wellness of our guests, including continuing to be the only airline that requires 100% PCR testing at both ends. This is something that we've had in place since August. And what this does is it really gives our guests that peace of mind that everybody on board our aircraft has tested negative. That's the passenger part out of the way. So let's talk cargo. So Etihad Cargo, 2020, it's quite a year. And I know it's been an incredible year for the cargo industry in general. The 24th of March will be a day that we'll never forget. It's the day that we suspended all of our passenger operations. But within 24 hours, we operated our first passenger freighter. And within 48 hours, we launched our passenger freighter schedule, deploying 6 aircraft, passenger aircraft, and we continued to build from there. In April, the UAE embarked on a huge aid program, donating PPE to various countries around the world. And Etihad Cargo played an integral part of distribution of that PPE. And we ended up operating to a number of destinations we'd never operated to before. In June, we restarted passenger operations, increasing the Etihad Cargo network as well to 56 destinations, and we was operating over 500 flights a week across the network. Now, cargo was a key contributor to us being able to restart those destinations. Without that cargo revenue, we wouldn't have been able to do that, because, and as we still see today, with passenger demand being as lean as it is on many lanes, it's cargo that makes those operations viable. And then in November, we started to transport the vaccine, initially operating a number of dedicated flights from China, bringing the Sinopharm vaccine into the UAE. Partnerships is something that has always been core to our strategy at Etihad. not only forging partnerships with other airlines to expand our network reach, but importantly ensuring that we are good partners to our customers by being flexible, by being easy to do business with. And that's certainly something that we will continue to focus on going forwards as the industry continues to navigate its way through this pandemic. I just want to talk just a little bit about the HOPE consortium that was launched in December. So this is really Abu Dhabi cementing itself as a global distribution hub for the COVID vaccine. The consortium is led by the Abu Dhabi Department of Health and is made up of various Abu Dhabi stakeholders, including Etihad. It's a unique initiative bringing together both private and public sector companies to provide basically a complete supply chain solution for the vaccine, including procurement of the vaccine, and really leveraging Abu Dhabi's global position of being within a 4-hour flight of 2/3 of the world's population. And in addition to that, another consortium member, Abu Dhabi Ports, and the port that we have here in Abu Dhabi, KEZAD, has the storage capability of storing at the various temperatures required up to 6 billion doses of the vaccines, and there is plans to expand that further. From an operational side, in recent years, we have really stepped things up, and we now have a much more robust operation. And that was really maintained during 2020, despite all the disruption. And then, of course, in terms of performance, and I know this will be common across the industry, Etihad Cargo had a record year in revenue terms in 2020, and we're expecting to achieve a similar number this year. In terms of our fleet, and important to point out, this is what's currently active. The 787-9s and 10s are and will continue to be our core fleet type going forwards. And in addition to operating 5 777 freighters, we continue to deploy both the 787s and 777s purely for cargo purposes. And in addition to that, we have 5 777s where we've removed the seats and therefore are doing in-cabin loading. And as you would expect, we continue to fly the 777 freighters very hard. We're averaging about 16.5 hours a day at the moment, and we continue to look to see how we can further optimize the schedule. Now, I don't want to preempt too much the topics for the panel discussion, so just some brief points on our plans and outlook for 21. The demand from a product mix perspective is returning to normal now. I think we're not going to witness another PPE phenomenon again, but the explosive e-com growth that was seen in 2020 will certainly continue on a strong trajectory through 21 and beyond. And of course, pharma will continue to grow as we continue the fight against the virus. From a fleet and network standpoint, we'll continue the high utilization of the freighter fleet and using the 777-300s and the 787 passenger aircraft as freighters. And where there is lower passenger demand, we will deploy the 777-300s with in-cabin loading. From a freighter deployment perspective, we'll continue to focus on key trade lanes, which are primarily for us, sort of Asia, Middle East, and Asia, Europe. And then, as Peter mentioned, digitalization, of course, will remain a critically important pillar for us. We'll continue to develop our platforms, such as we'll launch a new website with an improved booking experience. We'll have increased connectivity to other systems. And we want to maintain and even improve our position with being within the top 10 airlines in terms of airway bill penetration. And lastly, we will very much continue focusing on enhancing existing partnerships with key forwarders. Those that really, there is a great need for stability in terms of the capacity, and we'll be doing this through dedicated capacity projects with key partners. And of course, as I mentioned, as relates to the HOPE consortium, as members, we will continue to play an integral part in Abu Dhabi's distribution of the vaccine and the long-term play of Abu Dhabi to become a major logistics hub for pharma and life sciences. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So now I will leave the virtual floor to Steven.
Thank you. Also from my side, I would like to start congratulating Lars for once again organizing this great event. I think that the only one who can still spoil the show for him is us speakers, but I think I speak on each and all of us if we say that we will do our utmost to really make this a successful event. I had a few slides. I'm not sure if they can be shown or I should share them myself.
Yes, you can do it.
Okay. Always somebody struggling in starting the screen. So, okay, perfect. Thanks. Since I recently jobbed for the first time since long, I've worked for Brussels Airport 10 years. I feel the need to introduce myself a little bit again. So I just recently changed jobs to Nalian, but I continue to be the chair of the board of directors for TIACA. And in this panel, I am indeed speaking on behalf of TIACA, but I will use all my experience and knowledge to answer the questions in the widest variety possible. I think we have three speaking subjects today, and I would just quickly try to highlight them, but to set the scene, give my my first impression on them, and then we can for sure continue in the discussion. I will do them randomly, which I think is the most easily. And I think the easiest question is the restoring of the networks and the outlook for 2021. I think it's very important, and we realized that in the past months, we are very much linked to the cargo capacity of the belly operations. So a lot of the fleet restoring is not depending on cargo or cargo demand, but what is going to happen with the passenger side. And Lars already said in the beginning of his presentation that he was hoping the world would look different today than it actually is. And with the different messages we are also getting on the COVID new types of the virus, but also the setbacks in the vaccine distribution, the global look. I'm not sure if the passenger recovery will go that quickly, and it might take a bit more time than we are hoping for or we would like to see. So I think that especially in the next 6 months, it's going to remain difficult. But okay, maybe as after the summer period, things will start to improve. One of the benefits, of course, is that from the operational point of view, the fact that the rates remain rather high, it also allows that we can continue to use the passenger aircraft for cargo-only operations. That will help us to at least keep a certain network in place to meet global demand. And of course, those who are having freighters will use them to the maximum. I don't think we've ever seen such high loads factors in our industry. And also the number of hours being used for each of the aircraft types is really peaking. And of course, that is helping capacity. If you look at the sustainability, and Peter already made a few good comments on that one, I really believe that sustainability will indeed gain importance after COVID. Today, we are more focusing on surviving, on getting the things back in order and the financial part of it. But you already see in the discussion today that sustainability will become part of it, not only because of the efficiency, also because of a lot of governments putting more pressure on it, but also because of our customers and I think society putting more pressure on it. I think what will be really a challenge is that when we talk about sustainability, we are not going to talk just about environmental. If we talk about sustainability, it will be important to keep the 3 Ps, the planet, people, and profit in mind. And when we want to talk about only CO2, we talk about environmental. And we have to make sure that we do not start mixing that ourselves. Because sustainability is so much more than just environmental, and again, environmental is a very important part of sustainability, but it's not just that part of it. So I really think that we should not focus too much and put all the pressure. And again, it is, like Peter said, an important part of our CO2 emissions is the flying part. But when we were talking about getting a more sustainable industry, let's not as an industry, look at the airlines and put all the pressure on them to make their aircraft more greener and then say, yes, we are sustainable, that would be, I think, a missed opportunity for us as an industry. I think everybody in the chain will need to support the airlines on that part, but we also have to look at our own. It's not because handling agents, for example, only account for very limited amount. Also working more electric on tarmac and things like that need to be looked at, and we need to invest in that one. And I think to get to that part, we also need collaboration. Sustainability is not only a differentiator on a company level or a marketing stunt. I really think we need to support each other and make sure that we make the biggest impact. Sometimes there are companies who do not need to do too much, but can have a really big indirect impact on the next parts in the chain and supporting the environmental initiatives that are being done by another one. So if there are airlines really offering reduced emission or even CO2-free flights, it's also up to us, the industry, to support this kind of initiatives and maybe pay a little bit more than we probably would do, but that's how we do the collaboration, and I think that's a very important one. So what sort of cargo industry will emerge beyond today's turbulent times? I think that's the $1 million question, maybe even a $10 million question, because that's really uncertain. And I think that's what we have learned. Times are very uncertain, but we are also very agile. We are also very strong when it comes in dealing with the challenges. Lars said that we are seeing fundamental changes in our industry coming out of COVID. I don't agree completely. I don't think we're going to see drastic changes. I rather believe also what Peter said is that COVID is more a catalyst, and we will see a speeding up of things that are already happening. We are talking already for many years of working more at home, and it was always something stopping us. We need to see people, and the IT can't cope, but we need to talk to the unions, and we need to. There are so many things that needed to be taken care of, and it was going to take years. And suddenly, we all managed to do it in a few weeks. So when we get that outside push, we are capable of doing a lot more. So I think that we are making a jump. I think that the bar suddenly is higher. We start from a new normal that was otherwise only going to be there in 5 years or something. And that we start from that, and that we have to use that momentum ourselves, that 5 years we gained to move forward quicker and be more active and proactive on the changes we are seeing. I think the biggest challenge for us in the months and probably even years to come is our dependency on the belly capacity. And that will continue to be an issue. I also think that in our value chain, a lot of partners are really depending on the revenue they get from the passenger side. We have airlines, but also airports, handling companies. So it's going to be a question mark. How are they going to come out of this COVID? How strong are they going to come out, and what's the impact? And I think we're going to see more sustainability. We are going to see, like already said with the two previous speakers, more digitization, and we are going to see a lot more e-commerce. And those three are there to stay and are going to have an impact. I think that COVID has been, and again, from a personal point, nobody is happy with the situation, but COVID for sure is the biggest PR campaign for air cargo in many years. The question is, how are we as an industry going to deal with it, and how are we going to use that momentum created to our benefit for the long term? And that's the question for me. We should not leave it and in 5 years look back at this period and say we missed an opportunity. And I think that's an important consideration. Thank you, and I look very much forward to the next questions and discussion. I'll stop sharing and I give back to Frederick.
Yes. Thank you, Steven, and thank you all for your very interesting, I would say, speech and comments. And maybe my first question to all of you is regarding recovery in 2021, because you all put some, I would say, key touch point in your presentation, like digitization,
all of you, probably also e-commerce, dependency to the passengers and the belly for sure. So regarding 2021 outlook, did you see that before, I would say, the herd immunity probably in Western European countries and in the US around the summer? Do you expect an increase of the recovery after summer? So what are currently, I would say, your thought and your vision about the recovery in 2021? And maybe I will start by Peter.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do believe we will see a recovery, but what we all experience at the moment is that the recovery will pretty sure be much slower than we expected. So when you remember the plans, most of the airlines filed and discussed about was that at least after the first quarter in 2021, then the business is starting again. We talked about a spring peak and something like that. And I believe now we have clearly somebody to consider that this is not going to happen because the lockdowns are still in place. The travel restrictions are even more serious than they used to be. So I would consider that maybe when the vaccination now goes a little bit faster than we see it at the moment, and of course the weather is getting better and turning warmer, and of course the lockdowns we experience at the moment in Western Europe in these weeks bring lower numbers, then I would expect that with the end of the second quarter we will see some recovery. And we are talking, when it comes to a view on the whole year 2021, we talk about more about 50% than about 60%. So I think that's maybe all in all, being a little bit cautious, we may experience for 2021 then some recovery, but this also means it will be a challenging, but on the other hand, again, very profitable year for the air cargo industry.
Martin, what do you think?
So yeah, echo a lot of what Peter just said. I mean, as I sort of open with from a passenger demand perspective, even with the the rollout of the vaccine now, it is going to take some time. We're starting on the passenger side, starting to see certain segments starting to come back, but not to any sort of near the levels that we saw at 2019, be it sort of leisure, be it VFR. I think we can all agree that business travel is going to take an awful long time to really return to the 2019 levels, and then it's questionable whether it'll ever return to that level as a result of technology like this. Again, I think to Peter's point and Lars, as he opened with, we're all desperate to start returning in person to conferences, to exhibitions, to doing business in person again. So hopefully everybody feels like that, and and we will start to see sort of business travel return as the various restrictions start to get lifted. It's interesting from our side at Etihad, I mentioned that we have 5 777-300s where we've removed the seats. We were pretty late to the party with this. This is really a recent thing for us, and we debated long and hard. If we miss the boat with this, our yield's still going to hold up where this actually is viable. And so we evaluated that, but I think certainly for 21, because of the reasons we talked about in terms of that slower return of passenger demand, the yields are still going to support deploying passenger aircraft purely for cargo purposes. And as I said, I mean, obviously, in terms of demand on the cargo side, we continue to see in terms of the sales versus inventory sort of ratios, sort of inventory still continuing to be incredibly low. So demand is going to continue. We've already talked about the e-commerce boom. So there's going to be a huge amount of demand that's going to continue, and that demand is going to continue to outstrip supply in terms of capacity. So yes, I agree. I think for cargo, 21, I think is going to be very similar to 2020 in that regard, from a cargo standpoint.
Yes. Thank you, Martin. Maybe to change a little bit and to evolve in the question for Steven, because you also talked about the e-commerce. I think for sure e-commerce is still booming and will continue to boom in the coming years. It's clear. All indicators are moving in that direction, but we have also, I would say, move in the global supply chain that we see at each of the value chain of this global supply chain. There are some changes. There are also when you see in Europe or even in the US reshoring of some, I would say, industries, but also supply chain resilience. What do you think this, I would say, initiative could impact the recovery or I would say, the air cargo industry in the coming months and years?
Yeah, well, I think the world is always moving, and thinking that the situation we have today will be the same for the next 20 years. If we look back in history, what we have been transporting, what have been important drivers for our business, there has always been certain commodities. Look at in the 90s when we were moving the PCs, the laptops, and a full aircraft. Well, today one laptop is 1/10 of the size that we had at that time, and it also had an impact. So I think that air cargo, and we often say it, and IATA often says it, it's less than 1% of total global trade. So we are in a niche market. And that is something we have to keep in mind. I think that a lot of these things like the nearshoring might have a bigger impact on the maritime than rather on air cargo, because we live from that exception. We live from when things go wrong in supply chains. It's that agile, that flexibility, that uniqueness and speed we have that are going to always bring value to air cargo. So do I think that there is going to be a shift? Will we see certain commodities being less important? Absolutely, probably. But this has always been a back and forward going thing, and that will not stop. So I don't think that the nearshoring will have such an impact that in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, we will say, oh, we need less air cargo. Not at all. I think e-commerce is growing. Pharma is still growing. I think the mid-class globally is also still growing. That also, it might have an impact that it slows down a little bit, the growth, but that is also something we have seen recently. And it is also part of our sustainability. People will probably fly less and have more digital meetings. People will maybe think twice because of sustainability if they are going to fly. I don't see a difference for air cargo, but I don't see big changes coming up that are really going to be a big shock for industries. For me, it's an evolution, not a revolution.
Thank you, Steven. Maybe and to stay in this area, you are all talking about digitization, and I would say today is again a proof that we can make this kind of event fully digital, and we have in this digital stage since few minutes, and it's working pretty well. But when we look at the value chain again of the global supply chain, when we can see that the digitization was not very strong in few years ago, then net it's really starting, but there are still a lot to do when we look where this industry, for sure it's a niche industry, we know, but usually the value and that are transported are quite important and need speed. So my question also, if probably digitization, but at each step of the value chain of the air cargo could also ease the recovery, but also the growth of the air cargo. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, indeed. I believe, of course, this kind of digitization will foster the growth of our industry. And because what we suffered from in recent years was the fragmentation of our industry. So this means it wasn't easy to distribute the necessary informations from one part of the transport chain to the other. Of course, there were mistakes, there were shortcomings and all that. And with a full digitization, I believe this is more or less in coming years really coming to an end. And this means you have a kind of a virtual integration. So that was the integrators were able to do and to perform during recent years by person. I think now in the air cargo industry, with its fragmented supply chain, we are able to perform this during the next years with a growing digitization virtually. And so therefore we can expect faster transports, we can expect a more reliable transports, better outcomes for the customers, and of course, a more cheap way of producing this. So all in all, I believe this clearly will foster our industry, especially as there is a need for the often spoke about e-commerce of offering this service. So I do believe that's really a great opportunity for our industry, and now it's getting increasingly accelerated and it's getting faster. And now we are, of course, bringing the knots together as you need clearly all participants of the transport chain. And so therefore, I believe we really will make a big step forward after this pandemic situation.
Thank you, Peter. Martin, regarding digitization in Etihad, but also in the, I would say, air cargo industry in general, because we have also, when we look at the air cargo industry, there are a lot, I would say, freight forwarders, we have oil shippers, so we have a lot of, I would say, stakeholders in this value chain. So what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I'd been out before returning to cargo back in November. I'd been out of the industry focused on the passenger side for 5 years, and I have to say, I mean, returned after 5 years. I was pleasantly surprised the progress that's been made from a digitalization perspective, because I used to remember coming to being part of conferences like this where we spoke about it for so many years and nothing really progressed. So it's been really encouraging to see the progress that's been made, and certainly it was the integrators that always led the way from a digitalization perspective. From an Etihad standpoint, as I referenced in my opening, we've made some real headway. We've put a lot of investment into this year in terms of our e-airway bill penetration. As I said, we're in the top 10 carriers in the world in that regard. The technology platforms that we now have in place, and the ability to be able to, in terms of direct bookings, we've come a long way, as have the industry, and that definitely is, and I think in many ways, I suppose this pandemic has maybe forced our hand somewhat more in order accelerating the digitalization piece. But I think we're on a strong trajectory in terms of the improvements that have been seen from a digitalization perspective, which is obviously only going to help improve and make the supply chain that much more robust.
Thank you. Steven?
I think the word we have to say today is finally. The whole world is doing digital, and finally cargo is also making the necessary and the important steps. Of course, we are a very fragmented chain, and we have always been focusing on digitization within the enterprises, which is really normal. And like I think Martin said, the integrators have been leading that way, because for them the enterprise is the global chain, their global chain. And I think that for the first time we are indeed doing what we need to do, looking at a chain proposal, value chain proposal for our customers, and not just as an enterprise. In the past, every time when we were looking at the digitization, transparency, insights, my feeling is it was never used to benefit the solutions, but rather to use against the next one in the chain, to blame somebody. So it stopped people also being transparent and willing to digitize. And that for me, I think, is really a big mental shift we are making now. My idea is that we see a lot of progress on digitization, especially on the commercial sides with all these booking platforms and creating these insights. But a big opportunity is also still there on the operational side, making sure that the weak links become stronger, that we have more control on the chain, that we can be more proactive in avoiding mistakes, that we can reduce waiting times, that we can become leaner, and that also the ones in the value chain who are making probably today less money and who are less capable of doing the necessary investments, that we can also bring them to a level where they contribute the end customer. Because we will remain a chain, and we are as strong as the weakest links, and that is something really important for me in the whole digitization process in the years to come.
Yes, thank you. And you are giving me the opportunity to take the first question that we received. That e-commerce is definitely here to stay. And would you agree that there is a contradiction or a potential contradiction between, I would say, the e-commerce and its global sourcing versus sustainability? And this is also why we can maybe shift progressively to the last topic of the day, because we have 15 minutes ahead. it's about also the sustainability. So maybe just Stephen to answer to that question. So I would say e-commerce and global sourcing versus sustainability. How can we make it happen?
If you would purely look from it from an environmental point of view, we of course again have a different discussion, but from sustainability point of view, I don't see the conflict. I also think that when we talk about e-commerce, we have to think twice. If it's very, very cheap parcels, air cargo is too expensive to transport them. So we transport a certain type of goods that also require a certain speed. Every company is looking also at their own profitability. If at a certain point it makes more sense to produce it closer by, to have a distribution center, they will start doing that. But that also takes time. So you will see an evolution where you see a bit more transport and then a new distribution center comes up. That one will be, the fulfillment will be done by boat, by maritime, maybe topped up by air cargo. All these big players are optimizing their supply chain as well. So air cargo will only be a part of this. And it's not that e-commerce will all be flying. On the contrary, we will still be that niche market. So I don't think that we should be ashamed that we fly e-commerce. Same for perishables. We don't need to be ashamed that certain perishables fly. I think we contribute to that. And that if you look from it from a global point of view, also the way you create jobs in certain countries, how you can stimulate economy, how you can create education options for the young people over sustainability. So I really think that we don't have to attack this kind of messages, but we should also be proud of what we can do and how we do it, and not feel that we should be on a defense side on this.
Yeah, thank you. In that direction also regarding sustainability, I think also that we have, I would say, the customer, the end users, and also I would say the travelers when it's related to the belly. So in that context, what do you think will be the most important pressure coming from the users and the client, or also from the government? Because we see that regarding Paris Convention, the government, I would say an EU, I would say ambition is there, but the way to succeed is not that clear, the way to execute, because strategy roughly is clear. Execution is more and more in the industry hands, because I think that when I look to the industry, industry is probably going beyond probably that sometimes government are expecting. So how do you plan to handle this, Peter, with in the industry?
Thank you for this question. I have to say neither nor. I believe that the biggest pressure is coming from the media. And this is the reason why it's largely a Central Europe discussion, because the media tend to be very green and have a very green view, a paramount green view on all things. So the pressure is coming by the media, from the media, and of course then it influences the governments. So I think that's maybe the biggest issue. On the other hand, of course, there are valid customer interests, and also customers request getting more sustainable. But of course, it's still a quite low percentage. But I think what they want us to do is to move in this direction and show progress on this. So I think this is something we clearly owe not only to our customers, but to the world. But at the moment, what we really feel is the pressure by the media, because this pressure is on one hand strong, on the other hand, they want us to do things in such a fast and quick way that we maybe are not able to do this. So of course, all this, it's kind of a revolution if you do this. And of course, it will take some time. And we already undertook some quite big step during recent years. And I think we need a little bit more time to get this done. But clearly, we have to show, we have to communicate to our customers, also to the governments, and especially to the media, that we are on the right way forward. And I think what we really have to do is not only providing them with numbers and with technical explanations. What we really need is success stories. So this was the reason why we provided also this flight with Schenker, and I'm glad that we could do this with our customers. We will do this with other customers too. And we had really a big, huge media reaction, especially in Europe, but also around the world. And I think this shows what maybe the way for our industry is to be successful in this point, doing things, but also showing pictures, showing stories, building examples. I think this is very, very important, because our goal, we already moved forward. Because when you may remember, the goal of the aviation industry was to get rid of half of the CO2 emissions by 2050. But in the meanwhile, our more or less common goal is to be CO2 neutral by 2050. And this is really a huge step. And this shows, of course, we are moving in the right direction. This will create enormous efforts in our industry and in other industries. But I think what we really have to do is we have to show this by example. We have to lead also by stories. I think this is really, really paramount.
Yes, thank you, Peter. Fully aligned. Same question for Martin, but maybe with one additional. Nowadays, passengers, they can, I would say, compensate their flight by CO2. So each passenger, they can compensate individually, but we see that it's not that frequent, and the companies can do it, but we didn't see really popping up. Maybe after the pandemic, it will. Do you believe if with the digitization and that appetite for sustainability, that to have, I would say, to some extent, parcel neutral? So when we are making shipping goods, when we have a lot of people, and also in the e-commerce, could be also an option to move to this direction of sustainability with the e-commerce to compensate and ask the client, and I would say the customer, to compensate each parcel and to make it carbon neutral. So maybe Martin and Steven.
Martin, you want to go first?
So it's an interesting idea, Frederick. It's I mean, something that certainly is worth considering. I think that, to Peter and Stephen's point, it's in the grand scheme of everything, I think from a carbon emissions perspective, what the cargo industry actually produces in that regard is pretty minimal. And I think, again, as Peter pointed out, I think the media has sort of blows it somewhat out of proportion. I think, what is so important is that, all airlines are doing their part to reduce and offset emissions. I mean, certainly from, again, Peter mentioned it in his opening about a joint sort of approach that we have that's actually being led by Mubadala here in Abu Dhabi around the development of biofuels, which Lufthansa are very much part of as well. So, Abu Dhabi is really sort of focused on the development of biofuels, and through Mazda here in Abu Dhabi as well, they're sort of taking the lead on it. In addition to that, Etihad, we have a joint sort of program with Boeing, where we have a 787 that we call the Greenliner, that's in a specific sort of Greenliner livery that we use for various sort of sustainability initiatives, use of biofuels, no single-use plastics on board. And I think it's it's about actually telling that story, achieving results, and all doing our part to reduce those, to offset those carbon emissions. I think you can't do more than that, and I think that the industry is fully behind it, and it is about showing those successes.
Steven?
Yeah, ideally, of course, it would be the customer asking for this and supporting the initiatives. But I think that is still a way to go. Media will, like Peter said, have a big impact. That is not only for the airlines, but also for their customers. Every company needs to show what they are doing on sustainability and environment. I think that certain shareholders will become more active in it. But I also think that the younger generation does have a different mentality. And I see it when I cannot say that the kids at home are not doing e-commerce. On the contrary, and despite their smaller budget, for them it's naturally to compensate because they do have a different view. So I think that all these different elements all together will speed up that process, and hopefully we come to a stage where you do not pay extra to go green, but where you need to pay a fine for not going the green way, and that would be the ideal situation. It will take time, but yeah, I really think we're going to see progress on that. Yeah.
Peter, do you believe that the whole supply chain and all the stakeholders are ready and enough digitized to move to, I would say, that idea of being parcel neutral and compensated by, I would say, the end user and let's say the client?
So I believe for the moment, not everybody is ready. I think we have to take into account that, again, it's largely at the moment a European discussion. So I believe the European partners within the global supply chain, they are about to be ready to do this and try to work on this, to focus on this, and of course, work together with us on this item. But I think you can't say this for every part and every partner in the world. So I think there has to be we need some time, and maybe there also there have to be maybe some more insights on this we already got and we already believe in. So I think from a global point of view, of course, it will take a little bit more time. But in our industry, as you know, our biggest customers, the biggest forwarders in the world, are in a way European centric. And so this means I think we will see some quite big steps in our industry along the supply chain. But again, this is not for every part. The smaller parts, maybe in handling and other parts, maybe they are not that ready at the moment. But on the other hand, it's also a smaller part of this whole issue, of this whole problem. So I think more or less, of course, we will see some quite big step during the next 3, 5, 10 years. That's pretty clear within our industry. But I think we really should keep in mind that not everybody in the world at the moment is ready to view things like the Europeans do. So I believe to be really successful, and I think we all believe that we are on the right way, I think we have to take our time, we have to discuss, and we have to convince our partners all over the world. I think convincing is much better than telling them what the right thing is after we now know what is right and what is wrong. I think this proved also to be during past times, maybe not the best way of doing this. So we have to be maybe a little bit sensible in this respect.
Yeah, thank you. And I think as we got 15 minutes more in the session, that we will finally finish at 10:30. So I will have the pleasure to add a few additional questions. And we receive just a new one from, so the financial situation for airlines are more than challenging. The support from some governments are significant. What impact does it have on future recovery? How do you see the airline landscape in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you think that some merge and acquisition will happen and probably less airline groups? So maybe Peter, to start.
For the moment, I can't see a change in the landscape. And the reason is that more or less every airline, every bigger airline in the world got one way or the other, in one form or the other, aid by their countries, by the states, and some kind of survival package. So I believe this is something we have to take into account, and this means more or less 1 or 2 years. I think the most things will remain unchanged. I think afterwards there has to be a serious discussion what the world and the competition looks like, because something which the EU Commission looks at very keenly is there kind of a fair competition, and how in this worldwide competition does every airline comes out, and will it work accordingly? So I think this is some kind of political discussion we need to have worldwide, not only in Europe, but with Americas and other parts. And I think afterwards we may see, maybe after 2 years, something like that, then we all hope it's getting back to normal. And then I believe the questions which have been around and in the room already before COVID maybe are raised again, and then the question will restart. For the moment, I don't observe a fundamentally changed situation.
Thank you. Steven, what do you think?
It's a difficult one. I think a year ago when this started happening, we were probably also expected a bigger impact for some airlines. But I think, and again, of course, Peter knows much better being in an airline, but the fact that indeed everybody is impacted, and it's not a regional, it's not the European airlines or the Asian airlines, but that everybody is impacted, that makes a big difference. I think the fact that everybody is being held more or less in the same way creates like a gray area for 2-year periods where that do not count in that whole discussion. The smaller ones we have seen, those who are already like struggling, you see disappearing, but that is not really fundamentally impacting. Some will change some operations. If you see the Norwegians stopping with their long haul flights, there will be some changes in networks and the way airlines look at it. The question will be indeed once the recovery starts, and especially if recovery is starting not equal. If we by the end of the year in Europe and the States are going to be vaccinated, we might see a quicker recovery than in some other parts. That might have an impact on how quickly certain airlines might recover compared to other ones. But we are in a very global business with a lot of different regions, a lot of different countries. Fair competition is not always the same. So it's really, from a purely economical point of view, you can make statements on this one, but that's not always the case in the airline business. So a lot depends on what is going to happen and how certain governments, regions are going to react on it. So difficult to say, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. And Martin, what do you think from Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, so I think I suppose one of the risks is that with the as we start to see the recovery, and I do agree, it's very much going to be a phased approach in that you'll probably see Europe and North America where the vaccination programs will be implemented that much quicker, where we'll start to see demand coming back out of those markets maybe quicker than other markets, and it will be interesting to see how that then plays out where there has been a lot of government support for various airlines, and is there then a more protectionist move to protect some of those airlines who have been through an incredibly tough time? So do we start to see bilaterals being re-looked at and further restrictions put in just to ensure that there isn't a huge influx of capacity again? I tend to agree in terms of those airlines that we've seen the sad demise of. These were airlines that were already maybe not in the best of financial positions. I don't think, obviously, the longer that this continues, there is risk for other airlines going out of business, but I can't see it happening to too many more now. And obviously, governments have already come in to support them, and I'm sure potentially will continue to support them if required. That's the one thing for me, is that are we going to start to see a more sort of a protectionist sort of approach as the recovery starts to come back, and sort of countries wanting to protect those airlines that they've supported throughout the crisis.
Okay, thank you. Maybe another question that in that direction. So that there is kind of, if you look, I would say cab and taxi, you have kind of Uberization. Here, you see that when you look to parcel, Amazon is starting to be a very strong player. And they have probably sometimes ideas to develop their own value chain for carrying end-to-end, I would say, their parcel. Do you, and you have still very strong, I would say, express carrier, UPS and DHL and all of these. Do you expect that we can have like Uber in the taxi, a tentative or idea of Amazon or kind of Alibaba, of these kind of players, to complete by themselves the full supply chain, I would say, from their plant to the end customer, and to make the whole value chain by themselves? Do you think that it's possible, or it will come, or it will be quite disruptive? So do you think that this is possible, Peter?
I think it could be possible. I think this is something to a certain extent we are experiencing in the US, but I think we should remember what the reason is. The reason was that the other providers in the market were maybe not able to fulfill Amazon's needs in all times. So I think that was the reason for them to step into this business, because I talked to a lot of senior Amazon guys, and I believe they are not really keen on stepping up into this business, because they regard it as a difficult one where you need much money and all that. So they don't do it voluntarily. They would if they think they don't find another solution. And I think this is something we have to also keep in mind when it comes to Europe, where they start to do some things, but I believe they will do it to the extent the market and other players can't fulfill their needs. So therefore, I regard them merely as being potential customers. And I think what we should try as an industry, as airlines, but also as all the other providers in the chain, we should try to fulfill Amazon's needs. And then I would expect that they don't see the need and the necessity to step into this business. If we are not able to provide this, I think then they will. And of course, then there will be changes in the industry, throughout the industry. Firstly, of course, for the express providers, but afterwards also for the so-called classical cargo airlines.
Yeah, that's good. Steven, your opinion?
Yeah, the taxi business, they accepted payment cards, and for them that was the most digital way they could go, and they never saw anything coming. So thinking that it could not happen to us, I think is the biggest risk for us. Being self-confident that we are immune for this kind of changes and disruption is very, very dangerous. But I do agree with Peter that the better we become, the more transparent we become, the more difficult we make it for new entrants to be really disruptive. So it's in our hands to make it move forward. In the 90s, when the integrators started growing, they took a big part of the market share and a big part of the growth in air cargo business. And I think with the new entries of Amazon, of Alibaba, they will again start taking a big chunk of that growth and that market. So if we as a traditional industry do not want to be squeezed and we want to hide us after the overall growth of the industry, feeling that we do well, but also look at our market segment, we will need to do something. And that is the mindset, and where I really feel that today everybody realizes that we need to do things. Otherwise, we will end up with certain players buying capacity and playing that Uber in the air cargo industry. I also not necessarily think that is really bad, especially with all the belly capacity. It can even be a strategic choice for certain parties to become a more global network, because it makes competition easier. So for certain companies, I even see this as a strategic choice that benefits them rather than an issue. It all depends from company to company, and that's the benefit of this traditional air cargo industry. We are such a diverse industry that you have several options. But again, it depends on us and how we are going to deal with the whole digitization, because also the more we digitize, the easier it becomes to be subject to this kind of Uberization, but there is no way back. So it's going to be an interesting evolution.
Thank you. Martin?
That's a key point there, the digitalization piece, and that's where, without that and us continuing to make those advances, that's where we are, we'd continue to be at a disadvantage to the integrators, to not having the capability to be able to offer those solutions to an Amazon, to an Alibaba, and I totally agree in that we've got to work with these guys as they've already proven. If not, they'll do it themselves. So it's you have to work with them. And again, as relates to the sort of the Uber sort of concept, I agree in terms of that to me is an opportunity in terms of for carriers to be able to look to see how they better optimize their capacity through that approach. But yeah, the digitalization piece is key, and these companies sort of they're incredibly strong on that front. So we need to step up to the plate in that regard and really be able to provide them with those solutions to where they then don't need to go out and do it on their own.
Okay. Probably my last question to all of you. We discussed about the recovery. So when do you think that we will get the full recovery compared to 2019, I would say, tonnage and yield? Do you expect it for 22, 23, 24, maybe later, maybe never? We will go back to what were the capacity and what will be 2018 or 2019. So what do you think will be the full recovery, if ever? So maybe I can start by Martin.
I wish I had a crystal ball. I mean, obviously there's varying views on it in terms of, and obviously as we've talked about, a number of times today, it all comes down to, when there's going to be that return of meaningful passenger demand, which, estimates 23, 24. Obviously that then has a big impact on the cargo industry, starts to correct that sort of demand and supply sort of balance. Look, from our side, we from a cargo demand perspective, as I said, we continue to see continue to expect to see strong demand throughout this year. From a passenger demand perspective, I think sort of certainly by Q3, definitely Q4, we'll start to see the return of some meaningful demand. But again, as we talked about, as it relates to business travel and everything else, it's questionable if it'll ever come back to the previous levels of 2019. And really, our estimates are in terms of sort of return to any meaningful demand, you're looking at least 2023.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, I think this is a really difficult question. And you said already, when are we going to recover in volume and yields? I think that yield-wise, nobody is complaining. I don't expect any airline to wishing this changes quickly. So as an industry, we are very fragmented. Brussels Airport, my previous employer, is really suffering from the drop in the passenger demand. 100 kilometers from here, we have Liège Airport, and they are really booming because they are cargo focused. Airlines who are dedicated cargo are doing a really good job. Airlines who are also passenger driven are more struggling because the cargo part is doing well, but not the passenger part. Those who are yield impacted can recover part of it. So a lot of forwarders have lower volumes but higher yields, and they do cope. They are not complaining. Handling agents who are really volume driven and who not have that price elasticity, they are really suffering with that small drop in volumes. So I think that it's really different for each stakeholder in the whole supply chain how bad they are performing today. So rather than saying recovery, I would rather call it how are we going back to normal or pre-COVID times, where I'm not pretty sure if that is exactly what we need to do, but it's going to be, I think, at least late 2022 before there is going to be a bit more stabilization again and a balance between capacity and demand, and where all the different stakeholders are back sufficiently recovered, even if they are volume driven rather than yield driven. That's my expectation.
We let the last minute to Peter before we give the floor.
Thank you. As the colleagues stated, it's the billion-dollar question. But let me answer with a kind of a fun fact. When you look at the statistics till the 70s, the first half of a decade has always been proven very, very difficult for the airlines worldwide. And so therefore, this also, for other reasons, of course, fits in perfectly into this frame. So I really expect us being back at least at 2025, because this is the year when the second half of the decade starts. And so I believe we will be back.
I would say thank you very much, Peter, and we hope that this recovery will be the fastest and the strongest as possible for all of us and for the cargo industry. I think that's clear for all of us. And I was really pleased to be able to be there today with you. I want also to thanks again Lars for the organization of this event and to have welcomed us for this first, I would say, speech and talks about the road to recovery. And know that it's time I will give back the words to Lars to introduce the Outlook Asian market that will be moderated by Lim Chin Kiat. And thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also bien, au revoir.
Okay, Frederick, thank you so much. It was a great start for the day. Very valuable. Let's take a short 5-minute break and then we will reconvene. And as you heard, the next panel will focus on the Asian market. I would also like to remind you that we have a highly interesting exhibition. So please do not forget to go into the platform and click the button exhibition, and there you can visit and view what they have to offer. Okay, see you.